Hi, seekers of the abyss. Welcome once again to this sanctuary of the unknown. If you've ever wondered which films have truly captured the essence of cosmic horror, that primordial terror that reminds us of our insignificance before incomprehensible forces, prepare yourself, because today we're diving into a cinematic journey that will test your sanity. Today we'll explore 15 essential films that have managed to translate into cinematic language the most terrifying concepts from Lovecraftian literature and cosmic horror in general. Let's begin. We begin our descent with a film few know, but deserves absolute recognition. Lord of Tears transports us to the Scottish Highlands, to a semi-abandoned mansion where our protagonist, James Findlay, returns to face the demons of his past. Though these demons turn out to be completely literal, James is a teacher tormented by recurring nightmares since childhood. Dreams where a tall, slender figure dressed in Victorian clothing and with an owl's head watches him from the shadows. When he inherits the old family house in the Scottish Highlands, he decides to finally confront the origin of these nocturnal terrors. What's brilliant about this film is how it builds its atmosphere. Director Laurie Brewster understands that cosmic horror requires imagination and a deep understanding of what truly terrifies. The mansion becomes another character, with its dark hallways and buried secrets. And when the Owlman appears, the central creature of the film, the effect is visceral. The Owlman represents a manifestation of something much older, an entity that exists at the limits of our perception. Its origin traces back to forgotten Celtic myths, to gods that humans worshipped in ancestral times and never really left. They just waited. The film plays with the idea that there are places in this world where the veil between dimensions is thinner, where these entities can manifest. What makes Lord of Tears work so well is its deliberate pacing. The revelations come like waves, each more disturbing than the last. James discovers that his father knew something, that his family has been connected to this entity for generations. And the more he investigates, the more he realizes that some knowledge carries a terrible price. The cinematography is dreamlike, almost surreal at moments. There are sequences where you're not sure if what you're seeing is real or if James is losing his sanity. That ambiguity works perfectly for cosmic horror, because in this genre, the line between madness and enlightenment is so thin it practically doesn't exist. The film's climax is devastating. Without entering spoilers, let's say James discovers truths about his own existence he would have preferred not to know. The Owlman is there because James belongs to it in ways that transcend time and space. The film proves the genre is alive and can evolve without losing its essence. If you're looking for something that will unsettle you days after watching, this is your film. Now, we dramatically raise the intensity. The Void is an explosion of Lovecraftian horror pushed to its most disturbing visual extremes. Directed by Jeremy Gillespie and Stephen Kostanski, this film gets straight to the point from the first act. The premise is deceptively simple. A police officer finds an injured man on the road and takes him to the nearest hospital, but this hospital is practically abandoned, with minimal staff and barely any patients. What seems like a quiet night quickly turns into a nightmare when hooded figures begin surrounding the building. These figures, dressed in white robes and bearing triangular symbols, act as heralds of something much worse. And inside the hospital, reality itself begins to crumble. Hallways that shouldn't exist appear out of nowhere. The building's geometry stops making sense, and creatures that defy all description emerge from the shadows. What makes The Void so impactful are its practical effects. In an era dominated by CGI, these creators decided to return to horror's roots with makeup, prosthetics, and animatronics. And the result is glorious in its grotesque reality. The creatures that appear are Lovecraftian nightmares made flesh, twisted bodies, limbs where they shouldn't be, mouths opening in impossible places. There's one sequence in particular, approximately midway through the film, where one of the characters transforms. It's one of the most effective body horror scenes I've seen in years. The camera doesn't look away. It forces you to witness every second of the transformation. Every scream of agony as flesh twists and reforms into something that should never exist. But The Void goes beyond gore spectacle. There's a complete mythology behind what's occurring. The doctor responsible for the hospital has his own connections to the occult. He's discovered methods to transcend death, to reach dimensions beyond our comprehension. As always happens in these stories, forbidden knowledge has catastrophic consequences. The film explores themes of loss, grief, and the desperation that can drive us to do the unthinkable. The characters have their own emotional wounds that make them vulnerable to the promises of these cosmic entities. What would you be willing to sacrifice to recover a loved one? Where do you draw the line between love and obsession? The climax is pure visual insanity. We literally descend into an underworld where reality operates under completely alien rules. There's a nascent god, an entity being brought into our dimension, and the characters must navigate this impossible landscape while their minds disintegrate before what they witness. This film is brutal, not for weak stomachs, but if you can withstand the intensity, it will reward you with some of the most memorable cosmic horror images in modern cinema. The Void understands that Lovecraftian horror can manifest in both the invisible and the grotesquely visible, and it's not afraid to show both sides of that coin. Now we descend, literally and metaphorically, to the darkest depths of the ocean. Underwater was criminally underrated at its release, but cosmic horror fans have adopted it as a hidden gem, and for all the right reasons. Kristen Stewart leads the cast as a mechanical engineer in an underwater drilling station located 11 kilometers below the ocean's surface. When a catastrophic earthquake destroys part of the station, she and a group of survivors must walk along the ocean floor to reach another installation. But they soon discover the earthquake wasn't natural, and there's something else out there in the darkness. The first thing to understand about underwater is its pacing. This film wastes no time. The opening minutes already plunge you into the catastrophe, and from that moment, there's no respite. It's pure claustrophobia. The diving suits become metal coffins. Water pressure is a constant threat, and the abyss's darkness is total and absolute. But the film's true genius emerges when we begin to see what caused the disaster. The creatures that initially appear are terrifying on their own. Pale humanoids with limbs too long, moving in ways no terrestrial animal could. But they're only the beginning of what truly inhabits these depths. As they advance toward their destination, the revelations become more disturbing. The company they work for has been drilling deeper than permitted, venturing into zones where they should have left sleeping things undisturbed. And what they awakened is nothing less than a cosmic deity. Underwater's climax is spectacular. Without entering specific spoilers, let's say the film has the courage to show something very few cosmic horror productions dare: the full scale of a Lovecraftian entity. There's a moment where one of the characters looks up in the water, and what they see is so massive, so impossibly large, that the mind can barely process it. The production designers clearly did their homework. The final creature has all the elements you'd expect: tentacles, body geometry that defies logic, proportions that lack sense, and a presence that communicates absolute antiquity. This being was here long before humanity and will continue long after. Kristen Stewart delivers a solid performance, conveying terror but also the determination of someone who knows they're facing something beyond all comprehension. There's a monologue near the end where she reflects on human insignificance that distills pure cosmic horror. Underwater also works as a critique of corporate greed. The company knew something was down there. Legends warned about awakening those who sleep in the abyss. But the pursuit of profit overrode all caution. It's a classic horror theme, but here it carries additional weight because the consequences are literally apocalyptic. Visually, the film is impressive. Despite being set almost entirely in darkness, each shot is carefully composed. The diving suit lights cutting through the ocean's blackness create an atmosphere of total isolation. And when the creatures attack, the chaos is palpable but never confusing. You always know what's happening even amid the terror. If you're a fan of films like Alien or The Thing and want to see them fused with pure Lovecraftian mythology, Underwater awaits. It's action, it's horror, it's visual spectacle, but at its heart beats a story about awakening something that should have remained asleep, and the consequences of our arrogance as a species. Now, we arrive at one of the most faithful and viscerally disturbing adaptations of Lovecraft's work. Color Out of Space, directed by Richard Stanley, takes one of the Providence Master's most celebrated tales and transforms it into a cinematic experience that is as beautiful as it is terrifying. Nicolas Cage plays Nathan Gardner, a man who has moved with his family to a remote farm after his wife overcame cancer. They seek peace, tranquility, a simpler life. But when a meteorite crashes on their property, things begin to change in ways none of them could anticipate. The meteorite brings something alien, a color that doesn't exist in the human visible spectrum. It sounds abstract, and it is, but the film manages to communicate this visual impossibility in brilliant ways. The colors on screen begin to saturate. Magenta and purple tonalities appear that seem to vibrate with their own life, and the entire atmosphere becomes dreamlike and sickly. This extraterrestrial color begins to contaminate everything. The well water acquires an unnatural glow. Plants grow in grotesque forms. Animals mutate into impossible hybrids. There's a scene with the family's alpacas that is absolutely devastating, showing flesh fusions that violate all laws of biology. But what's truly terrifying is how it affects the family. They begin to lose time, to have lapses where they don't remember what they were doing. Their personalities change, becoming more erratic, more violent. The mother begins to fuse with her son in one of the most disturbing body horror sequences I've seen, a scene that will be burned into your retina. Nicolas Cage is perfect in this role. There are moments of Cage being Cage, with his characteristic explosions, but here they work perfectly. His descent into madness is gradual but relentless. You see a man trying to maintain sanity while his entire world, literally and figuratively, crumbles in alien tonalities. Richard Stanley understands cosmic horror. He doesn't try to explain the phenomenon too much. There are no scientists giving lectures about what exactly this color is or where it comes from. It's incomprehensible by nature, and the film respects that incomprehensibility. What we see is the effect, the devastation that can be caused by something as simple and as impossible as a color that shouldn't exist. The cinematography is spectacular. The farm's landscapes begin bucolic, almost idyllic, but gradually transform into something from a psychedelic nightmare. Trees twist into impossible forms. The sky acquires tonalities that hurt the eyes, and there's a constant sensation that reality itself is being rewritten by this extraterrestrial influence. The climax is apocalyptic in scale, but intimate in emotion. We see the Gardner family's final fate, and it's devastating. There's no heroic victory here, no way to combat something so fundamentally alien. All that remains is witnessing how the contamination expands, knowing it could eventually reach beyond this isolated farm. Color Out of Space is also a meditation on illness and powerlessness. The family was barely recovering from cancer when this new threat arrives, one that makes human diseases seem trivial in comparison. It's existential terror, the idea that there can be things in the universe that can destroy us without even being aware of our existence. The film ends on a note of warning. The phenomenon hasn't ended, it's only beginning. And that sensation of inevitability, that we've witnessed only the first act of something much greater, is quintessentially Lovecraftian. Cosmic horror is never about solving the problem. It's about realizing that some problems are so vast that our only option is to witness our own insignificance. We now arrive at what many consider the most important cosmic horror film of the past decade. Annihilation, directed by Alex Garland and based on Jeff Vandermeer's novel, is a science fiction masterpiece that delves deeply into Lovecraftian territory without ever mentioning Lovecraft. The premise is fascinating. An extraterrestrial object has impacted a lighthouse on the United States coast, creating a zone called the Shimmer that is constantly expanding. All military teams sent to investigate have disappeared, except one. The husband of our protagonist, Lena, played by Natalie Portman, who returns but completely changed, almost catatonic. Lena, a biologist and former military, joins an expedition composed entirely of female scientists to enter the Shimmer and discover what's occurring. What they find is a world transformed in ways that defy all biological logic. The Shimmer refracts instead of destroying. It takes the DNA of all organisms within it and mixes them, recombines them, transforms them into impossible hybrids. There are plants with human form, trees that grow in shapes that form people, flowers that sprout from bodies. It's beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, nature reimagined by a completely alien intelligence. But the sequence everyone remembers, the one that has become iconic, is the encounter with the bear. Without entering specific plot details, there's a moment where the team is attacked by a mutated bear. What makes this creature so terrifying goes beyond its physical appearance. It has absorbed the screams of a previous victim. The bear screams with a human voice, calling for help while attacking. It's one of the most disturbing scenes in modern horror cinema because it violates something fundamental in our psyche. Cries for help are programmed to generate empathy, to make us want to help. But here they've been converted into a weapon, used by a predator that doesn't even understand what it's saying. Its nature transformed into something unnatural, and the result is pure nightmare. As the team ventures deeper into the shimmer, the film becomes more surreal, more dreamlike. Time loses meaning, memories become confused, and the protagonist's own cells begin to transform. The threat operates at a molecular level, rewriting life's very code. The climax inside the lighthouse is a sequence that has generated infinite debates and interpretations. Lena encounters the source of the shimmer, and what she witnesses is so alien it can barely be put into words. There's a dance, an imitation, a creature trying to understand what she is by copying her in ways that are beautiful and terrifying. Visually, this sequence is astonishing. The special effects create something that seems organic but also crystalline, something that moves with grace but also with mechanical precision. It's life, but operating under completely different rules. It's intelligence, but following parameters our minds struggle to comprehend. What makes Annihilation so effective as cosmic horror is that it never stops to explain too much. We don't know exactly what this entity is, what it wants, or if it even has intentions in the sense we understand. We only know it's changing everything in its path, creating something new and beautiful and terrible. The film is also a deep exploration of self-destruction and trauma. All the women in the expedition have their own reasons for being there, their own self-destructive tendencies. The shimmer becomes an external manifestation of their internal struggles, a mirror that reflects and amplifies their own demons. Natalie Portman delivers a nuanced and complex performance. We see her character transform, both physically by the shimmer's influence and emotionally as she confronts truths about herself and her marriage. The film's ending is deliberately ambiguous, leaving questions about who or what really returned from the shimmer. Annihilation masterfully fuses beauty and horror. It's a film that makes you think as much as it terrifies you. It poses questions about identity, about what makes us human, about whether change is inherently good or bad. And it does this while showing you some of the most unforgettable images in recent genre cinema. Now, we arrive at an independent gem that proves genuinely disturbing. Cosmic horror can exist without large budgets. The Endless, directed by and starring Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, is a film that makes you question the very nature of reality and free will. The story follows two brothers, Justin and Aaron, who escaped years ago from what they thought was a dangerous cult. Living mediocre lives in the city, they receive a video message from the camp where they stayed, and Aaron convinces Justin to return for one last visit, just to have closure. When they arrive at the camp, they find their former companions living apparently in peace and harmony. There are no obvious signs of cult behavior, no one tries to recruit them aggressively, and everyone seems genuinely content. But there's something strange in the air, something the brothers can't immediately identify. Soon they begin to notice anomalies, objects that move in ways that defy physics, events that seem to repeat, a moon that never moves from the same point in the sky. And gradually they realize something terrifying. They're trapped in something much worse than a traditional cult. The camp exists within a temporal loop controlled by a cosmic entity. This entity, which we never see completely, but whose presence is constant, has trapped these people in cycles that repeat over and over. Some loops last days, others years, but all eventually reset, condemning their inhabitants to relive the same events eternally. What's brilliant about The Endless is how it gradually builds its mythology. There's no moment of grand revelation where everything is explained. Instead, the brothers, and we, piece things together, seeing how different people in the camp have learned to live with this reality. Some have accepted it, finding solace in repetition. Others are desperate to escape. There's a particularly unsettling scene where one of the residents shows the brothers his personal loop. Each cycle, he records himself leaving messages for his future self, trying to discover how to break the cycle. He has boxes full of VHS tapes, each marked with dates that don't make sense. a record of failed attempts extending over what could be decades or centuries. The entity controlling these loops is presented in subtle but terrifying ways. Sometimes it appears as strings in the sky, lines connecting different parts of the camp. Other times, it's a presence you can only feel, an alien attention that observes without judging, without truly understanding what it has trapped. What makes this entity so terrifying is its complete indifference. It's not torturing these people for pleasure. It has simply trapped them, perhaps without even realizing it, like we might trap insects in a net without considering their suffering. We're so irrelevant to this cosmic force that it doesn't even register our pain. The brothers begin to realize they too are being drawn into the loop. Time behaves strangely around them. They start forgetting things, confusing events. And the terrifying question arises: is this their first time returning to the camp? Have they been trapped in their own cycle without realizing it? The Endless's climax is tense and emotional. The brothers must make decisions about who they are and what they're willing to sacrifice. Is it better to live a mediocre but free life, or find meaning even within a temporal prison? There are no easy answers, and the film doesn't pretend to offer them. Visually, the film achieves much with limited resources. California's desert landscapes become alien under the right light. There are shots where the sky seems more like a ceiling, where the camp's geography seems to change subtly between scenes. It's disorienting in ways that reflect the character's experience. The Endless also works as a meditation on time and meaning. If our lives are finite, what gives them value? If you could live the same perfect day forever, would you? Or is mortality essential for our experiences to have weight? These are deep philosophical questions wrapped in a horror film that never feels heavy or pretentious. This film's connection to Resolution, the director's previous work, adds additional layers for those who've seen both. They share a universe, and there are references and characters that cross between them, suggesting this cosmic entity has multiple experiments running simultaneously. The Endless proves cosmic horror can be intimate and personal while maintaining its cosmic scale. Sometimes, the most terrifying thing is realizing your entire life could be just an insignificant moment in a game you don't understand, played by forces that don't even know you exist. And we arrive at Master John Carpenter's first work on this list, a film that closes the first half of our journey spectacularly. In the Mouth of Madness is possibly the purest exploration of Lovecraftian horror that Carpenter made. A love letter to the Providence Master that works both as homage and as an independent masterpiece. Sam Neill plays John Trent, a cynical and skeptical insurance investigator hired to find Sutter Kane, a horror novelist who has disappeared just before delivering his final manuscript. Kane is described as the world's most popular author. His books cause physical reactions in readers, and his disappearance has provoked panic among his fans. Trent, accompanied by Kane's editor, Linda Stiles, played by Julie Carmen, follows clues that lead them to a town that supposedly only exists in Kane's novels, Hobbs End. And this is where reality begins to crumble. Because the town exists, with its black church, its strange inhabitants, and all the locations described in Kane's fictional novels. The film's central question is terrifying. What happens when fiction becomes reality? Can an author, by writing about cosmic horrors, inadvertently invoke them? And what happens when you realize you yourself might be a character in a story written by someone else? Carpenter plays brilliantly with these ideas. The film is structured as a flashback narrated by Trent from an asylum, which immediately casts doubt on the reliability of everything we see. Is he really insane? Or has he seen truths the human mind isn't equipped to process? As Trent and Linda delve deeper into Hobbs End, things become increasingly surreal. They encounter Kane, who explains to them that his stories work as prophecies. He's channeling ancient entities waiting beyond our reality, and his final book will be the catalyst that brings them into our world. What makes In the Mouth of Madness so effective is how it constantly blurs the line between reality and fiction. There are scenes where Trent experiences events only to see those same events written in Kane's manuscript. Did he really experience them? Or is he simply acting out what was already written? Does he have free will, or is he a character following a predetermined script? The creatures that appear in the film are classically Lovecraftian, tentacles emerging from darkness, impossible geometries, transformations that violate the laws of biology. But Carpenter uses them sparingly, understanding that in cosmic horror, suggestion is often more effective than complete revelation. There's a particularly memorable sequence where Trent tries to escape Hobbs' End in his car. He drives for hours, but no matter what direction he takes, he always ends up back at the town. It's a perfect visual manifestation of the concept of inevitability that's so central to cosmic horror. You can't run from your destiny because your destiny was already written. The film's climax is devastating. Without entering complete spoilers, Trent realizes the true nature of his existence in ways that are both philosophically terrifying and visually impactful. And the ending, where we see the consequences of Kane's final book's publication, is apocalyptic in scale, but presented with a dark irony characteristic of Carpenter. Sam Neill delivers what might be his best performance. His descent from confident skeptic to a man shattered by cosmic revelations is gradual but relentless. There's a scene near the end where he finally succumbs to hysterical laughter at the absurdity of his situation. That's both disturbing and strangely cathartic. Visually, the film has Carpenter's distinctive style, but with a more surreal touch than his other works. Colors are saturated, camera angles become increasingly disorienting, and there's a brilliant use of practical effects that make transformations feel tangible and visceral. In the Mouth of Madness also works as a critique of mass culture and the power of narratives. Kane doesn't need complicated rituals or ancient artifacts to bring his dark gods. He only needs enough people to read his words, believe in his stories. It's an idea that resonates even more in our era of viral information and alternative realities. The soundtrack by John Carpenter and Jim Lang is unsettling and atmospheric, using both melodic themes and dissonances to create a constant sensation that something is wrong. There are moments of absolute silence that are as effective as any musical stinger, allowing the weight of revelations to settle. This film is Carpenter at his most ambitious and philosophical. It poses questions about the nature of reality, fiction, and sanity that stay with you long after the credits end. It's essential for anyone interested in cosmic horror because it understands that true terror comes from realizing everything you believed could be an illusion, and that your own existence might be just a footnote in a much larger cosmic story. We now cross the threshold into territories where cosmic horror meets the most visceral and explicit terror. Event Horizon, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, is a film that has gained cult status for very specific reasons. It's brutal, unapologetic, and takes the idea of hell into outer space in ways that still disturb decades later. The year is 2047, and a rescue ship called Lewis and Clark is sent to investigate the mysterious reappearance of the Event Horizon, an experimental ship that disappeared 7 years ago during its maiden voyage. The crew is led by Captain Miller, played by Lawrence Fishburne, and accompanied by Dr. Weir, played by Sam Neill, the ship's designer. The Event Horizon was built with revolutionary technology, a gravity drive that could fold space-time, allowing faster-than-light travel. In theory, it would create an artificial black hole, pass through it, and emerge instantly at another point in space. But something went terribly wrong. When the crew boards the abandoned ship, they find evidence of a catastrophe. There's blood on the walls, systems are damaged, and there are no signs of the original crew. But the most disturbing thing is a video recording they discover. The final moments of the original crew in a frenzy of self-inflicted violence and mutilation that's almost impossible to watch. The revelation that comes is terrifying. The gravity drive opened a portal to another dimension, a place of pure chaos and suffering. The ship didn't just go there, it became conscious, infected with whatever exists in that place. The Event Horizon is now a living entity that wants to drag its new crew back to the hell it came from. What makes Event Horizon so effective is its absolute frankness about the implications. This other dimension is explicitly described as hell, literally a place of eternal torment, where the worst nightmares become real, where pain and terror are the only existence. The ship begins psychologically attacking the crew, showing them visions of their worst fears and traumas. Each member sees something different: a son who died, a lost lover, personal horrors amplified and twisted. The ship feeds on their suffering, growing stronger with each mind it breaks. There are sequences in this film that are genuinely difficult to watch. The violence is explicit and creative in its brutality. bodies mutilated in ways that defy anatomy, acts of self-mutilation performed with smiles on faces, and a constant sensation that suffering represents the very purpose of this place. Dr. Weir is particularly vulnerable to the ship's influence. As its creator, he feels a special connection to it and is gradually corrupted completely. Sam Neill delivers a performance that goes from tormented scientist to demented prophet of this infernal entity, with prosthetics and makeup that transform him into something monstrous. Event Horizon works as cosmic horror because it presents forces beyond our understanding. This hellish dimension follows its own rules of physics and morality. It's pure chaos, existence reduced to its cruelest form. And the idea that it's out there, accessible through technology, is terrifying in its proximity. Visually, the film is dark and claustrophobic. The ship is designed with a gothic and industrial aesthetic, with narrow hallways, flickering lighting, and an architecture that seems almost cathedral-like. The gravity drive in particular is a design marvel, a rotating ring of spikes that looks like a mechanized crown of thorns. The climax is a battle both physical and psychological for survival. Captain Miller must make impossible decisions about who to save and what to sacrifice. And the resolution, though offering some relief, makes clear that what they witnessed has left permanent scars. Event Horizon is also notable for what it doesn't show. An original version exists that contained even more extreme sequences of gore and horror, but they were cut by the studio. This footage was lost, and fans have been searching for it for years. But even in its edited form, the film is intensely disturbing. This film is space terror in its darkest form. It takes the premise of films like Alien and pushes it into purely supernatural territories. What they find is a dimension where suffering is eternal and escape is impossible. We now descend into territories of found footage and government conspiracy fused with Lovecraftian horror. The Banshee Chapter takes elements from the real history of the CIA's MK Ultra experiments and takes them to terrifying conclusions. The film follows Anne Rowland, a journalist investigating the disappearance of her friend James, who had been experimenting with a drug called dimethyltryptamine 19, supposedly developed by the government in the 60s for mind control experimentation. But this drug opens doors to other dimensions. What's brilliant about the Banshee Chapter is how it anchors its horror in real facts. The MK Ultra program existed. The CIA really experimented with psychedelic drugs on citizens without their knowledge. The film takes this uncomfortable truth and asks, what if they discovered something? What if some of those mental doors they opened shouldn't have been opened? Anne begins investigating, following the trail to an eccentric writer played by Ted Levine, clearly based on Hunter S. Thompson. He has knowledge of these drugs and what they really do, and he's paranoid with good reason, because those who take DMT-19 begin tuning into radio frequencies where they hear impossible transmissions and attract the attention of something. The entities in the film are never completely explained, and that works perfectly. They appear as humanoid figures, but clearly alien, moving in ways that lack naturalness. When you're under the drug's influence, you can see them, and they can see you. It's a terrifying concept. There are things sharing our space all the time, we just normally can't perceive them. The found footage format works exceptionally well here. We see footage of the original government experiments, recordings of victims before they disappear, and Anne's documentation of her own investigation. The mix of styles makes everything feel unsettlingly real. There's one particular sequence where Anne and the writer decide to take the drug themselves to understand what James experienced. What follows is a descent into paranoia and terror, where radio transmissions become clearer, numbers start having meaning, and shadows in room corners begin moving with purpose. The horror of the Banshee Chapter is both psychological and visceral. The idea that your mind could be an antenna, and that tuning to the wrong frequency could reveal cosmic horrors, is profoundly disturbing. It's Lovecraftian horror filtered through modern-era paranoia about government and control. The film also explores themes of dangerous curiosity. Every character who seeks answers ends up wishing they hadn't found them. Knowledge of these entities and how to access them represents a curse that marks you forever. Visually, the film uses its limited budget brilliantly. The entities' appearances are brief but impactful, leveraging the limitations of found footage video quality to make the figures more unsettling. We never see them completely, just enough to know they're not human. The Banshee chapter ends without clear resolution, as it should in authentic cosmic horror. Anne discovers truths, but those truths don't provide her peace or closure. They only confirm that there are things in the universe better left unknown, and that some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. Resolution, the first work by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead before The Endless, is a meta-exploration of cosmic horror that works on multiple levels. The story begins simply. Michael receives a worrying video from his childhood friend Chris, who's living in an abandoned cabin consuming methamphetamine. Michael decides to intervene, literally chaining Chris to a pipe to force him through detox for a week. What seems to be a drama about addiction and friendship quickly transforms into something much stranger. Michael begins finding different recording media around the property. Old photographs, videotapes, hard drives. They all seem to tell stories, fragments of narratives that occurred in this place over decades. But there's something more disturbing in these findings. The stories never end well. They always culminate in violence, death, horror. It's as if this place, this particular cabin, is a stage where tragedies are enacted over and over. And Michael begins to suspect he and Chris are the protagonists of the latest story. Resolution's genius is how it gradually reveals there's something watching them, something documenting their actions, waiting for their narrative to reach a satisfying conclusion. The characters realize they're being manipulated, pushed toward a predetermined ending by an entity that consumes stories. This entity is never fully shown. Sometimes it's a presence felt in the air. Other times, it manifests through the media, Michael finds. It's narrating their story, waiting for it to end in the most dramatic way possible. And the characters struggle against this narrative inevitability, trying to write their own ending. What makes Resolution so effective is how it works as meta-commentary on horror itself. We're accustomed to characters in horror films making stupid decisions, heading toward their tragic destiny. But what happens when characters realize they're in a horror story? Can they change the ending? The film constantly plays with our expectations. We expect certain events to occur because that's how horror films work, but the characters actively try to avoid those tropes. However, the entity watching them wants blood, wants terror, wants a cinematic climax. Visually, Resolution is minimalist but effective. The cabin and its surroundings become increasingly oppressive as Michael and Chris realize their situation. There are shots where the camera lingers on empty places a bit longer than comfortable, suggesting an observing presence. Resolution's climax is disturbing in its ambiguity. The characters try to negotiate with the entity, offering different endings for their story. But it's unclear if they succeed, or if they're simply postponing the inevitable. The ending deliberately leaves questions open because that uncertainty is part of the horror. This film works as cosmic horror because it presents an entity that operates under completely alien rules. Humans are entertainment, narratives to be consumed. Our agency, our free will, might be just an illusion created by forces that see us as characters in their stories. Resolution is also a reflection on addiction and how our own personal narratives can trap us. Chris is trapped in the drug cycle, Michael in the cycle of trying to save him, and both are trapped in a larger cosmic narrative they don't fully understand. This film's connection to the endless enriches both works. They share the same cosmic entity, the same universe where stories have real power and where humans are players in games they didn't design. Watching both films is experiencing different facets of the same Lovecraftian horror presented in innovative ways. Now, we arrive at something completely different in tone, but equally cosmic in its implications. Spring, also by Benson and Moorhead, is a love story with Lovecraftian body horror at its heart. It's romantic, it's beautiful, and it's absolutely terrifying when it reveals its secrets. Evan is a young American going through the worst moment of his life. His mother just died of cancer, he loses his job after a bar fight, and feels he has nothing keeping him in his city. He decides to travel to Italy, seeking to escape his pain and find something, anything, that gives meaning to his existence. In a small Italian coastal town, he meets Louise, a beautiful and mysterious woman who works as a researcher. There's an immediate connection between them, and Evan decides to stay longer, taking a job at a local farm to be near her. What begins as a typical romance quickly transforms into something much stranger. Louise has secrets, ancient secrets, secrets involving her own nature and what she really is. Without entering specific spoilers, let's say Louise isn't completely human, and what she is connects to very ancient mythologies about transformation, evolution, and survival across eons. What's brilliant about Spring is how it balances its romantic narrative with cosmic horror revelations. The chemistry between Evan and Louise is genuine and moving. You really care about them as a couple. But gradually, as Louise reveals what she is, the film ventures into body horror territory that rivals anything on this list. Louise's transformations are presented with impressive practical effects. We see her body change in ways that are biologically impossible, but visually fascinating. Limbs that reconfigure, skin that transforms, forms that emerge and retract. It's beautiful in its horror, horrific in its beauty. But what makes Spring work so well is that these transformations have emotional context. Louise has lived for millennia, taking different forms across eras. She has loved and lost more times than she can count, and now faces a choice: transform again and lose everything she is, or find a way to remain human. The film explores themes of mortality and immortality in profound ways. Evan is dealing with his mother's death, confronting his own mortality. Louise has lived so long that death has almost no meaning for her. Their romance becomes a meditation on what it means to be alive. What makes life worth living when you know it will end? Visually, Spring is stunning. Filmed in real locations in Italy, the film contrasts Mediterranean beauty with the horror of Revelations. There's something deeply unsettling about seeing Lovecraftian transformations occurring on sunny beaches and picturesque towns. Horror infiltrates spaces that should be safe and beautiful. The film's climax is both romantic and terrifying. Evan must decide if he can love Louise knowing completely what she is, including the parts of her that defy all human understanding. And Louise must decide if the love of a human lifetime is worth sacrificing her eternal nature. Spring works as cosmic horror because it presents the idea that there could be beings among us who have existed since before humanity walked upright. Beings who have seen the rise and fall of civilizations, who have loved humans as we love pets, knowing their partners' lives are a blink compared to their own existence. Spring's ending is surprisingly hopeful for a cosmic horror film, but without losing ambiguity. Questions about Louise's nature, about what her transformation really means, remain partially unanswered, and that uncertainty is perfect, because some things simply cannot be fully comprehended by human minds. We now return to more direct and visceral terror. The Beach House is an independent film that takes the concept of alien invasion and filters it through atmospheric body horror and psychological claustrophobia. Emily and Randall are a young couple traveling to Randall's family beach house to try reconnecting their crumbling relationship. Emily is focused on her marine biology studies, while Randall seems to be losing direction in his life. The tension between them is palpable from the beginning. When they arrive at the house, they discover it's already occupied by an older couple, friends of Randall's parents. After the initial awkwardness, they decide to share the house for the night, and the two couples end up on the deck sharing wine, food, and conversations about life. But there's something strange in the air that night. A dense fog begins surrounding the house, a fog that seems to glow with an unnatural luminescence. The characters begin experiencing strange effects after consuming what they think are marijuana edibles. But what they're experiencing goes far beyond any drug. The fog contains something alien, something that's transforming marine life on the coast in fundamental ways. Emily, with her biology knowledge, begins to understand they're witnessing an event of potentially global magnitude. This threat could change all life on the planet. What makes The Beach House so effective is its intimate scale. Most of the film occurs in this single house, with only 4 main characters. But the implications of what's occurring are cosmic. We see mutated marine organisms, creatures that seem like impossible hybrids, and the characters themselves begin to transform. The body horror in this film is gradual but relentless. It begins with mild symptoms, nausea, disorientation, skin spots, but gradually it becomes more extreme. There are sequences where characters experience transformations that are difficult to watch, where their bodies betray what it means to be human. Emily tries to rationalize what's occurring, use her scientific knowledge to understand the phenomenon. But there's a moment where she realizes this is beyond the science she knows. This is something fundamentally alien, operating under biological rules we've never encountered before. The film also explores generational themes. The older couple represents a generation that lived their lives without worrying too much about environmental consequences. Emily represents a generation that will inherit a damaged planet. And this alien invasion becomes a metaphor for ecological collapse, for the consequences of ignoring nature's warnings. Visually, the beach house uses lighting in brilliant ways. The fog glows with colors that seem incorrect, tonalities that shouldn't exist in nature. The beach house's familiar spaces become alien under this light, each shadow potentially hiding something transformed. The film's climax is devastating in its hopelessness. Emily realizes there's no escape, no way to stop what's occurring. She can only witness how the world she knows transforms into something new and terrible. The ending makes clear this could be the beginning of humanity's end as a species. The beach house works as cosmic horror because it presents a threat that infiltrates at the cellular level, that rewrites the very DNA of life on Earth. And the idea that our own biology could betray us, that we could be transformed into something no longer human, is profoundly terrifying. The film is also a perfect example of doing much with little. With a minimal budget and a limited location, the creators managed to convey existential terror and create images that stay with you. It's proof that cosmic horror only needs ideas that touch our deepest fears. This is one of the most conceptually audacious films on this list. Glorious takes the most minimalist premise imaginable, a man in a public bathroom talking with a cosmic entity through a hole in the wall, and builds a narrative that is both philosophical and genuinely terrifying. Wes is a man going through a massive personal crisis. After a night of excess at a highway rest area, he wakes up disoriented and enters the public bathroom. There, from the adjacent stall, he begins to hear a voice that knows things about him, things no one should know. The voice belongs to Nyarlathotep, a Lovecraftian entity trapped in our plane of existence, and we're talking about something with power to literally unmake reality. But it's trapped, needs human help to complete a ritual that could free its true power. And it has chosen Wes for this task. What's brilliant about Glorious is its absolute containment. Almost the entire film occurs in this bathroom, with a single visible actor on screen. But the conversations between Wes and the entity are fascinating. The entity has its own logic, its own perspective on the universe that is so alien we can barely comprehend it. As the conversation continues, we learn more about Wes and why he was chosen. His personal crisis is connected to events in his past that make him vulnerable to the entity's manipulation. And the revelations about what's really occurring, about the true purpose of this encounter, escalate in madness and cosmic implications. The film brilliantly plays with the theatrical format. It's almost like a chamber piece, with dense dialogues and gradual revelations. But there are moments where we see glimpses of what the entity really is, visions of impossible geometries and forms that defy description. These moments are used sparingly, making them more impactful. Nyarlathotep, as presented here, is a fascinating reinterpretation of Lovecraftian mythology. It has objectives that go beyond our understanding. It speaks of preventing something worse, of maintaining cosmic balance in ways humans cannot understand. Is it sincere, or is it simply manipulating Wes with plausible-sounding lies? What makes Glorious work is J.K. Simmons's performance as the entity's voice. He delivers the lines with a mixture of authority, condescension, and something that could almost be empathy. He sounds like something trying to communicate with an inferior species using concepts we can understand. Ryan Quanten as Wes also delivers a solid performance, showing the emotional arc of someone who goes from confusion to terror to a kind of resigned acceptance. You see a man confronting both the vastness of the cosmos and his own personal demons, and realizing the two are more connected than he thought. Glorious's climax is both intimate and cosmic. The decisions Wes must make have personal consequences, but also potentially universal ones. And the ending, without revealing too much, leaves questions about the nature of reality, free will, and whether it really matters in the grand scheme of things. Glorious is proof that cosmic horror can be philosophically rich while maintaining its capacity to disturb. Sometimes, a conversation in a bathroom is enough to make you question everything you thought you knew about reality. We now return to another John Carpenter classic, a film that functions as the second act in his exploration of cosmic horror. Prince of Darkness is a fascinating mix of science, religion, and Lovecraftian terror, presenting concepts that remain disturbing decades after its release. The premise begins when a priest discovers an ancient cylinder in the basement of an abandoned church in Los Angeles. Inside the cylinder is a green, turbulent liquid that, according to ancient manuscripts found with it, contains Satan. But this Satan goes far beyond traditional Christian theology. It's something much older and more alien. The priest contacts a quantum physics professor to bring a group of graduate students to investigate the cylinder. Carpenter brilliantly mixes science and the supernatural, suggesting what we consider demonic could simply be physics we don't understand. The equations describing the being in the cylinder seem to be both religious and scientific. As the group investigates, strange things begin to occur. The homeless people in the neighborhood gather outside the church, moving in synchronized manner as if controlled by a hive mind. One of the researchers begins translating the ancient manuscripts and discovers this being in the cylinder is actually the son of something even worse, an entity that exists on the antimatter side of the universe waiting to be freed. What makes Prince of Darkness so effective is how Carpenter presents real scientific concepts in ways that sound like black magic. He talks about tachyons, particles that travel faster than light and therefore move backward through time. The characters begin receiving transmissions from the future, warnings about what will occur if the being is released. These transmissions from the future are some of the film's most unsettling images. Grainy videos showing a dark figure emerging from the church, with the date marked as years in the future. All the characters have the same dream, receiving the same warning. It's a brilliant use of the concept of cosmic causality, the future trying to prevent its own existence. The liquid in the cylinder begins acting, possessing members of the group one by one. The possessed people become heralds of the being trying to manifest, attacking the others and trying to completely free the entity. The possession sequences are visceral and disturbing, with performances that communicate something completely alien is controlling these bodies. Carpenter uses practical effects brilliantly here. The green liquid seems to have a life of its own, moving in ways that defy physics. When it possesses someone, it enters through the mouth in a scene that's difficult to watch, and the effects on the human body are grotesque. The possessed develop strange secretions. Their bodies deteriorate while serving as vessels for something not designed to exist in our dimension. The film also explores the idea that ancient religions might have been describing scientific truths using the language available in their time. What we call Satan could be a dimensional entity that primitive humans could only conceptualize as a demon. And its father, waiting on the other side, could be something even beyond our capacity to name. Prince of Darkness's climax is tense and claustrophobic. The survivors are trapped in the church, surrounded by the possessed outside and betrayed by the infected inside. The final battle occurs both on the physical and metaphysical plane, with the question of whether they can really prevent what the future already showed them will occur. The film's ending is ambiguous in ways perfect for cosmic horror. Did they succeed in containing the threat, or did they simply postpone the inevitable? The final shot suggests the struggle isn't over, that these cosmic forces are patient and will eventually find another way to manifest. Prince of Darkness is Carpenter, at his most philosophically ambitious. It asks questions about the nature of reality, about whether science and religion are really different ways of describing the same cosmic truths. And it does this while maintaining a constant atmosphere of terror, proving you can have intellectual depth without sacrificing the ability to scare. And we finally arrive at the perfect closure for our journey. John Carpenter's The Thing is simply one of the best horror films ever made, and its exploration of cosmic horror is unparalleled in mainstream cinema. It's a masterpiece on all levels: acting, effects, atmosphere, themes, and pure visceral terror. The premise is elegantly simple. In a U.S. research station in Antarctica, the crew witnesses a Norwegian helicopter desperately trying to kill a husky dog. The Norwegians die in the attempt, and the Americans adopt the dog. But this dog hides something much more sinister. It's an alien life form that can perfectly imitate any organism it absorbs. What makes the thing so terrifying is the paranoia it generates. Once the team realizes what they're facing, anyone could be the thing. There's no way to know who's human and who's a perfect imitation. Trust crumbles, friends turn against friends, and the station becomes a psychological battlefield. Rob Bottin's effects are legendary and have never been surpassed. The Thing's transformations are Lovecraftian nightmares made real. Bodies that split in half, heads that develop spider legs, mouths that open in places they shouldn't. Each transformation is different because the Thing is improvising, combining biology in ways that defy all logic. What's brilliant is these transformations serve both narrative and thematic purposes. Each reveals more about the Thing's nature, about how it operates, about what it's capable of doing, and each is more grotesque than the last, escalating the horror in ways that maintain tension throughout the runtime. Kurt Russell as MacReady leads the cast with an iconic performance. He's pragmatic, paranoid when he needs to be, and willing to do whatever necessary to survive. But even he remains under suspicion, and there are moments where we doubt him, where we wonder if he's already been assimilated. Dean Cundey's cinematography creates an atmosphere of absolute isolation. Antarctica is presented as Earth's most inhospitable place, where nature itself is hostile to human life. And now, trapped in this brutal environment, the characters must face something hostile in ways that go beyond the natural. Ennio Morricone provides a minimalist but effective soundtrack. There are no grand orchestrations, just synthesizer pulses that create constant tension. Silence is used as effectively as sound, allowing the horror of situations to settle without musical interference. The blood test scene is possibly one of the most tense sequences in all horror cinema history. MacReady has devised a method to identify the Thing, heating a blood sample from each person, because each cell of the Thing is an individual organism that will react to protect itself. The scene is a masterful exercise in tension building, where each test could reveal who the threat is. The Thing also works as a metaphor for disease and contagion. The idea that something could infiltrate your body, rewrite your cells until you're no longer you, is terrifying on visceral levels. And the fact that the Thing preserves its victims' memories, that the imitations believe they are who they say they are, adds layers of existential horror. The Thing's ending is perfect in its ambiguity. MacReady and Childs meet in the station's ruins, both suspecting the other could be the Thing, but too tired to keep fighting. They sit in the snow, sharing a bottle, waiting for the cold to kill them. Is either of them the Thing? Both? Neither? Carpenter never gives us the answer, and that uncertainty is perfect. The Thing is cosmic horror in its purest form. The Thing is completely alien, with no motivation we can understand beyond survival and replication. And that indifference, that lack of malice or purpose beyond instinct, makes it more terrifying than any villain with human motivations. The film also poses questions about identity and what makes us human. If an imitation has your memories, your thoughts, your personality, is it any less you than the original? Where does identity really reside? These are deep philosophical questions wrapped in a film that also works perfectly as a survival thriller. Visually, The Thing has aged incredibly well. The practical effects have a weight and tangibility that CGI simply cannot replicate. When you see the Thing transform, you know there's something physically there on the set, and that reality translates directly to the horror you feel as a viewer. The Thing is the perfect closing for our journey because it encapsulates everything that makes cosmic horror effective. It presents a completely alien threat, operating under rules we don't understand, and makes us confront our own fragility and insignificance. And it does this while maintaining a tense narrative and characters we genuinely care about. And here we end our descent through the most terrifying cosmic horror films you should know. What all these films share is a fundamental understanding of cosmic horror, that there are things in the universe vaster than us, older than our civilization, and completely indifferent to our existence. Our concepts of good and evil are irrelevant to forces operating on scales we can barely imagine. But there's also beauty in this terror. There's something profoundly human in confronting our own insignificance and finding meaning despite it. These films remind us we are small, yes, but also that this smallness doesn't make us any less important to ourselves and to those we love. From here, I send you a warm embrace, seekers of the abyss. We'll meet again on another journey through the mysteries and horrors lurking in the dark corners of our universe. Until then, keep the lights on, and remember that some knowledge carries a price. But curiosity is part of what makes us human, even when that curiosity leads us to places that might have been better left unexplored.